will start mine. So we're going to be talking tonight on my part about what to consider when you're developing a lease and how do you develop this rental rate. And I should point out before I get started on anything, the Leasing page will take you to the link to where the Jenny Rhodes's and May Johnson's webinars were recorded at, and then any of the materials we have on leasing stuff. So the leasing book that Greg talked about is up there. And when we get to it, the county rental rates are up there. They're also available on this MD Risk Management Education blog link at the top. And then the other thing I need to point out, and you'll probably get about 2 more emails from me on this one, is there is an evaluation, clearly marked evaluation on the links. You can get it there. And my presentation is up online too. I was actually ahead of the game today and got stuff online early today. But my normal disclaimer, I am an attorney. Nothing I say tonight is legal advice. Okay, I'm on the record and being recorded, so this is good. Like I said at the start, this is all part of a grant we got to the Northeast Risk Management Education Center, which is a part of USDA NEFA. So we thank them. I'm also a part of the Ag Law Education Initiative, which is a collaboration between the Cary School of Law, the College of Ag and Natural Resources here at College Park, and then we also bring in UMES into it as well. Our website's there. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We have an email address where you can reach any one of us. There's about 4 legal specialists that work for the program, and each one of us have access to that email. So if you forget anything and want to get a hold of any of it, similar at both schools. They didn't work together. This was a way to get them to work together and leverage the state's resources to do more programming together. We're probably one of the only ones you ever hear about, as I often point out to people, because a lot of the ones that are together right now are either geared towards public health or they're university programs that you typically would not see outside of the university settings. So we're one of the few extension type programs. Now I've kind of given my shameless plug on everything. We'll start with the overview of what a lot of this is going to be about. You know, many of you may want to lease farmland. You may be a landlord. You may be a tenant. And this is going to be a big deal. And the main thing we're going to talk about here in a lot of this is you're going to have to match up your goals with the other party's goals. So no matter who's involved in this, if you're a landlord or you're a tenant, you're going to want to make sure your landlord or your tenant's goals matches up with a lot of what your goals match up to be. That's going to make the relationship work a lot better in the end. As you're looking at this and as we look at this, there's going to be, you know, what are your priorities as you're doing this? We're going to talk about getting the lease in writing. We're going to talk about conservation practices. Greg kind of hinted upon this, that, you know, people want water when they rent farmland. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about, you know, setting rental rates. At the end of this, we're going to talk a little bit more about tools available to help you calculate that rental rate. We're going to discuss a few more things as we go along. So, you know, as we're starting this out, you know, you need to think about what your priorities are. You know, do you want crops grown a certain way? Do you want a long-term lease? If May was on this presentation, she would talk about producers or landlords not understanding what it takes to become certified organic and expecting the farmer to go out automatically and be certified organic. Not understanding that takes a process that takes a few years to gain. So you need to understand what you're trying to do in this process. You know, do you want a long-term lease? why exactly do you want to lease the land if you're a landlord? Is the property properly zoned for what you want to do? These are all things you have to think about. And then in the end, you turn it that would work better. If you're a landlord or you're a landowner, would a custom farming operation be better for you? Do you just go out and pay someone to do the work and you take on all the risk, or do you really want to rent the land out? It's all up to you what your priorities are and what you're comfortable with. One special note, if there is a conservation easement on the property, make sure your priorities conform to the easement. You may find out that what you want to do does not exactly conform with the limitations in the easement. And if you do have an easement on the property, make sure the land or the tenant knows what those restrictions are so they can conform to them. Because if you're the landowner and they violate that, you're going to get in trouble for it. Um, more than the tenant is. So you want to make sure everyone is. We talked at a previous conference about potentially just attaching the easement document as an appendix to the lease so everyone knows what is written on it. I see Jim. Ooh, what are some examples? What are some examples, Greg, of restrictions that would be in easements? My mind is drawing a blank. Oh yeah, Greg's pointing out there's, if you're in some federal programs, they may limit how much impervious surface you could have, so you may not be able to put concrete pads out on the property. Some may restrict, yeah. Some others maybe they may restrict. And Jenny's pointing out there are sometimes deeds of restrictions like no poultry, no dog kennels, utility easements. Yeah, those are all good examples. It is too late in the day and my brain is fried. I apologize. Um, so we'll go back to the slide. I told my colleague at Texas A&M I'm going to make this farmer who sent this to her famous. So she was sent an email after writing a column on why you should have your grazing lease and write an email that said I disagree with you and feel there that if a lot else had been done with the handshake, this country would be better off. Well, that's one person's opinion. It happens to be a very wrong opinion. Um, I use it to highlight the fact that the main problem in ag is we have a lack of written leases. We have them from time to time. We don't always have them when we need them. There are going to be issues with memory. These leases typically last for a long period of time, and none of us remember details that far into the past. As much as we like to think we're really good at it, none of us remember things that well. And developing the lease isn't going to be a simple document that we can just remember. There's going to be a lot of detail that goes into it. If there's a conservation easement on the property or some sort of restrictions on the property, you're going to want that document to incorporate it. So it's going to need to be in writing at that point. You're going to want the tenant to know what the restrictions are. If you're a part of one of the cost share programs and have practices put on the property, you're going to want the tenant to know what those practices are and what the restrictions are. So if there's a tree line on the property that was put in with cost share, you're not going to be able to go out and cut down that tree line right away. You're going to have to wait a period of time, and you probably don't want to do that if cost share money is involved in it. So like I say, you're going to want to put this lease in writing. I often tell people, think of it as a reference tool in the end. All of our memories are going to be bad at the end, and we're going to want a reference tool. I always put Mary Lou Henner in my presentations, and if this was actually live where you can answer the question, I would ask you who that is and why I put her up there. But that's Mary Lou Henner, and she suffers from a rare condition to where she is one of, I think, 50-something people in the world that have been documented who remember every detail from every moment of every day of her life. So you give her a day, she can tell you exactly what happened to her. Problem as well. considered it's probably a good thing. Um, skip the written lease. Since there are 7 people in the world that have going to be very, very rare that we're going to have two shows up like the same. So all the rest of us need to put our leases in writing. With conservation practices, This goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where if you know you want the farm farmed a certain way, you're going to want to put that in the lease. You're going to want to put it in writing. It goes back to, this is not a simple document that you're going to be able to do a few things with. You're going to want this thing to be a very complex document in the end, potentially. With conservation practices, if they're not put into the lease, there's really nothing out there that's going to protect you. There's this implied covenant to use good husbandry practices in many leases. It's not written in, it's just assumed to be there. Maryland has actually never found it to be there. If you're in Pennsylvania or somewhere like that, it has been found in many cases in Pennsylvania, but it's just going to be very agricultural practice. That conserve soil fertility. And soil benefit many conservation practices. You mind you may want to actually specify what you want done. So if you want no-till use, specify that. If you want minimum till use, specify that. If you want organic production use, specify that. It's just one way to make sure it's all specified in there. So like I said, clearly define what you want done. Many landowners are often shocked that they can't just tell a farmer what to do once they've started renting the land and they had to specify it early on in the lease. Along with the conservation practices, make sure you understand the environmental regs, especially if you're the landowner. Make sure you understand what the farmer is having to deal with. Make sure you understand nutrient management requirements and when potentially you need to make sure that things are being followed with the property, especially if you're the owner. So what are some other considerations? Well, one is, water. Is there a source of water on the property? Is there irrigation equipment? Who pays for repairs to any well that's on there? So typically it's below ground up into the pump. is going to be the landowner. Anything from the pump on is going to be the tenant, but you may want to specify exactly how expenses will be shared. There may be a certain dollar amount that either the landlord or the tenant has to make. Are going to be shared. Um, with the rent, what is going rental rate? We're going to in a minute, but we have cash rent, we have crop share, we have flex cash leases. What's going to work best for you in these situations? You're going to need to potentially reevaluate these each year. I'm going to show a tool here near the end that helps you kind of calculate this rental rate based on what current cost of productions are. And the reason for this is that you want to go back is, in 2013 we may have had crop or rental rates bid up, but is that actually going to work in the current market for 2015, 2016? So potentially we're going to need to go back, especially landlords, and reevaluate these things from time to time, because the economics may tell us we're going to have to take a lower rental rate in the end. The other thing to point out, set the date when it's due. always make is aware of when that's going to be. If you're using the flex cash or the crop share leases, you're going to want to set that far enough into the future past harvest so everyone knows um, what the amount is going to be. And I should explain what crop share and flex cash are. So crop share is just where the landlord gets a percentage of the crop in return for allowing the farmer on the land. Flex cash, the idea there was farm size in the Midwest was getting too big, so these were developed in the Midwest. Everyone liked crop share leases because they gave incentives to landlords, but record keeping was getting harder and harder for tenants. They may have multiple landowners that they're dealing with on the same piece of property. So this idea of a flex cash lease came about. It works similar to a crop share lease. So you're potentially going to pay X dollars per acre per year,